Hey friends, it's me, Gabriel, your leader of the Wolfpack, coming to you with that evening spark, your spiritual growth, just spiritual growth for short, or the way of the eternal journey. And that'll make a little bit more sense as we get into this spiritual conversation. So, it all comes down to having a growth mindset. I saw a video on this today and it just clicked. It was like Holy Spirit was like, see this video, see this content, and man, it came together, man, and it's cool, and we're sharing this with you. A lot of us live in these result-based mindsets, these fixed mindsets. It's more about the result. You're chasing the result. And so then we become very fixated on how everything has to be, and we ended up getting burned out and things like that. But one thing I've recognized is that it's more about the process than the result itself. The result is you are going to get a result whatever you do in life. So it's not about whether or not you're going to get a result, but more about having the process, the result come out of the process. That makes sense. It's not like, what? Crazy, I know. But let me tell you, let's keep cracking in, keep going down the rabbit hole. So, one thing is that you have to trust that the result will come from the process. There is a certain sort of hope and expectation, but it's not necessarily so much about this finite result, because then it's a disruption of our perspectives, our priorities, and I'll get more into that. But the results, they're continuous, they're constant, they're always happening, and they're always based off of the processes that we instill within our lives. For example, one way that, like for me at least, that maybe you deal with in your work, deadlines and things like that. Well, one thing I was realizing is that when I got so caught up in I've got to meet these goals, I've got to meet these deadlines, it was really stressing out, because it was either I have it or I don't have it. But rather, when it's a process, what is the process that can help get you to that point as far as that work ethic and the things that make that up, making that my focus, and living a life and going forward in a life that instills a sense of wanting to be able to better communicate with people, to help people be able to see what pretty much help them see that they're important and valued and that they matter. From that aspiration, the results from that will come about. And this also applies to if, for instance, you're trying to kick a habit or an addiction or what have you. And you just keep getting caught up in the results, so to speak, of I don't want to smoke anymore, what have you. And you keep just focusing on that. What you're doing is you're focusing. It's good that you may want to quit smoking, but it's one of those things where, because it's the focus on the result, between that time, what's going on in your mind is that you're saying I haven't stopped smoking, and so that's what your focus is on. Your focus, and so then a lot of times we either get burned out, we get discouraged, we get kicked back into our habits or our addictions, and then we're no better. So what you have to do, though, is focus on the process. Because here's the thing, you never really have the result until it happens, and then you're off to the next thing. You don't know what to do with yourself. It becomes a sort of, if A happens, then B. And it's troublesome because, you're always ending up chasing these things. You always are chasing these results, and they're never satisfying. Now, we should strive to be all that we can be, to be sure. We shouldn't just, settle and become stagnant. But it's imperative that we don't do it from a standpoint of just chasing all these results, because it's going to feel like you're just chasing, as Scott Fitzgerald says, it's like you're chasing that green light, the ever elusive, dream that year by year recedes before us. And then you get, like I was saying, you get discouraged, you get bummed out, Because the process that you have that right now, you can instill that in the moment by moment, and that really makes it a lot more energized because it's constantly changing, it's constantly fluid, and so you don't get burned out as much, and it's more than about what you can give in this process of love and forgiveness. I can give that to my coworkers, I can give that to my situation, and so things aren't you're more apt to bounce back from your troubles, as it were. So like for instance, um, uh, if you want to see a more loving work environment, don't focus so much on the fact of the result necessarily, because then because if the environment doesn't happen whenever there's some sort of chaos, you're gonna be like, oh well, now that's not happening. What do I do? But then when you focus on the process of how and why you're doing that and what to do to instill that, the spiritual commands to give into your mind, those loving thoughts, as it were, you can go into, you can put that into action, and you're able to make it happen. um, yeah, and so from that, the result will inevitably happen, um, because you're putting forth that process. It kind of just, things happen based off of what you are instilling within your life. And what helps as well, because you have to remember that attack stems from deprivation, a sense of deprivation. And so if you feel deprived of your goal, you're constantly going towards this deprivation based mentality. So there's going to be a lot of attack, a lot of gnashing of teeth and beating against the thorns. But you don't have to be that way, because then there's that energy and there's something about this sort of energy that you have when you're excited about the process. Because whatever you set your heart out to do, you have to have such a motivation to be able to do it on the good days and the bad days, whatever kind of day, to be able to get you through any sort of kind of storm, as it were. And if your motivation, you're just constantly looking at the result, you're going to be constantly seeing that which you don't seem to have. And so you're going to, in your mind, you're pretty much just constantly cutting yourself down and crippling your motivation. And that's why I think so many New Year's resolutions end up failing, because they focus so much on their result, but then they see themselves, maybe if they want to lose weight, that's a common one. They say they want to lose weight, they seeing themselves as not in that shape, and then they get discouraged. But what we should do is rather say, okay, you want to lose weight, that's cool. What is the process, and what is the reason for why you would want to go in that way? Okay, run. Just be focused. I'm just running. And then you use the I don't know if I said this already, but you use the results as reference points to kind of gauge how you're doing. And you either you're always refining, but rather, in the sense of, if you've accomplished your goal, let's say you meet that weight loss, but you tried, maybe there's some things you can improve more. Okay, maybe now I can run more. Now I can try and eat a little bit healthier. But if it's not working, it's not to say that it reflects who you are, but it's just that the process needs refining. And I think that helps as well, in this process, because we fail inevitably, but through this, you're more caught up in the process. You're more resilient, because instead of looking at, oh, I didn't succeed, okay, you look at, okay, what, you kind of go back and you reassess how did things go, and you're more willing and open to being able to work, adjust. Maybe you realize that maybe your standard is too high. Maybe you're saying, I want to lose 50 pounds in 2 weeks, and then you don't meet that, and then you have to be able to reassess. You have to be able to have that touch of reality and being able to play with that. So let me see. I've got my notes here a little bit. So yeah, and what it does is, it causes you to readjust how you approach life. Not that the obstacles are what are denying your happiness, but that they are a means to express the spiritual flow, accepting them as part of the journey. Because for instance, that you become more loving doesn't magically mean that you don't have to deal with hateful people or mean people or what have you. It means that when those people come into your life, it will help actually serve as an opportunity to express the Christ to them. Because if we think, oh, and I think this is one of these things that helps against addiction, is because we think it's this one moment, this final battle, and I'll finally get rid of it and I'll be amazing. But it never happens. So many times we end up finding ourselves going back to it. So it's more about focusing on our abundance because of the process. The process has a sense of abundance because you're focused on what you do have. You're focusing not on what you don't have, but you're able to focus your thought on what you do have, on what you can do. I can do this, whatever it may be, because the process is the thing that will make it work. It just needs refining, perhaps. Maybe a little bit more dedication, a little bit more of this. I don't know. It's all different for each person. But it's cool when it happens, man. Because life is not a series of grand final battles set against good and evil, but a deep, eternal ocean for us to swim through the currents of life. That by our journey, we will find our certain end, our home in heaven. So that's what I got for you, friends. I hope some of this made sense. I hope, it was I felt like it may have been a little scattered. I don't know. I was just really excited. When you get excited, you're just like, this is it. This is Gabriel in the raw spiritual conversations. But yeah, if it doesn't make sense entirely, shoot, send me a comment. We'll chat it up. I'll be happy to help. Kind of help jam things out with you. And yeah, so go forward and let's really shake things up. It's gonna feel different. Let me tell you, it feels different for me when I was starting to go about this, but it's amazing the shift of thought. So roll with it. See what happens. Here at the Wolfpack, we wish you well and Godspeed. Peace, friends.